the materials I work with have to feel good to me while I'm working on them. People that wear them say it's a very sensual kind of feeling to have these things or touch these things. And I don't know, I think I'm just a primitive in a contemporary society.
Kaeleen Manuel is a painter. In her home high in the Santa Cruz Mountains, she maintains a studio, producing paintings to wear. Applying pigments to chamois leather, she paints pictures that become capes, jackets, collars, handbags, gloves, belts, and other things. In the early 1970s, she started painting feathers, which have since become her trademark. Her transformation into a painter of unusual surfaces began with fine arts studies at UCLA and the San Francisco Art Institute.
I graduated from there in painting, but one of the interesting turning points, I think, was when they took a few of us on a tour of the museum and took us down into the archives and showed us all these amazing pieces of artwork that were in cold storage, so to speak, and not being viewed by anyone, and it was just horrifying to me. It wasn't a real positive experience. So I thought, well, there must be some other way to do art and not just have it shoved down in vaults and hidden away. And a friend of mine around that time had an art supply store and had some outdated textile pigments. I think it was Inco dye or something like that. And one of my favorite painting teachers had just had a baby. So I decided to make this little painting for the baby that it could wear. You know, it was just a fluke. I started to raise a family, had 3 little babies, which didn't leave me much time for painting. And I thought it would be great to make clothes for them and paint them. And I couldn't find the materials. All I could find were these kind of strange little artsy craftsy decorating things. So I researched it and finally found this textile paint that was pretty satisfactory and started painting clothes for the kids. And that got me back into my painting mode again, and it was a good excuse to paint that I was making something for the kids. And then as they grew up, I had more time to work, and I just decided that it was the way I wanted to work was painting on clothing, and that would pay for my art supplies because you could always sell something to wear, and that it was a good way to get art out on the street and, you know, a broader audience.
Kaeleen's work involves layers of symbolic images. The sources of these are a combination of natural life forms, her dreams, and her own private world of intuitive symbols.
There was a series I did maybe 10, 15 years ago that had to do with eggs and ropes. And the eggs had little pictures on them, which was symbolic of a particular life that egg carried in it, or an identity. And the ropes were traps, but they weren't bad traps. It was just a symbolism of being bound within a particular journey or a particular kind of life that you had to complete. And so that was my egg traps, or my fish traps. I was painting fish a lot, and they had symbolic pictures on them, and they were bound in the ropes, and then those became belts that you bound around yourself, and it was a It was just, I was very interested in just binding things. And then some of the fish started to have little drips or tears or water coming down out of them. It was just a progression of these different symbols. And I really don't know where that came from. I mean, it just, it's like you catch it out of your mind and you catch it out of the air, and you just get very involved and very interested in the progression of a thought or a symbolism. And sometimes it carries on for 6 months, and sometimes it carries on for 6 years. But with the feather, it started off as being a decorative process. And then as I got interested in the symbols of the feather, I also got interested in snakeskin, the patterns on snakes. They didn't look like flat scales, they looked like tiny little feathers that were stuck on the snake. So then I started thinking, well, you know, this might have been the original feather. And after, well, then I was painting these strange little symbols on the feather, but the first feather that I painted for a piece had the snakeskin print on the feather. And I didn't connect it up, but after I looked at it, I said, oh, well, that's what I noticed on the back of some of the snakes, that it was a feather. So now I'm putting the print of the snakeskin back on the feather, so it makes this loop. But it wasn't a conscious thing at all. It just, it came out after I'd done it, so it was a real subconscious act on my part.
Her work with feathers began as an experiment for a friend and has evolved into a major medium for her own work.
A friend of mine who's a designer in New York had asked one of my friends who's a dyer to dye some feathers because he wanted to use them on a piece. And she tried it and it worked okay, but the feathers came out looking kind of, you know, like they were beat up or something. So I decided I'd try doing it as a favor for him for this piece. So I used some of my fabric paints on some feathers that I got at this little craft supply store, and it just worked beautifully. But at the time I was doing it, I thought, this is nuts, you know, I'll do it for Ben, but this takes so much time, it's crazy. So I sent these feathers off to him, and then I started, it just kind of clicked in my brain, and this compulsive kind of thing came out, and I said, I've just got to see what it's like to put these other images on. So I started this one piece, I guess it was about 12 years ago, that where the patterns on the feathers were essentially a real simple snakeskin. It was just kind of drawn on. And the piece that I was painting on, it's a leather piece, needed about 300 feathers. And when I got to 150, I said, you know, I can't turn back, and I really don't want to do the rest of these, but I have to, you know, to finish the piece, which I did. And said, you know, that's it. I'm not going to do any more. And about a year later, the bug bit me again. So I think I've painted thousands and thousands and thousands of feathers, and the techniques have become very complicated and overlaid, but it was all a matter of just progress, you know, over a period of a few years. I'd add some more kinds of inks, or I found a photo silk screen machine, or when I was in Japan, I started drawing on them with felt tip pens, and so it's just been a real process, and I'm still hooked on the feathers, and still hooked on the fabric painting, and still hooked on the leather painting, and it's just taken on many dimensions. There's probably 3 or 4 steps in the feather painting where you have the blank, and then you have to prime it, and then you do the drawing on it, and then you do the painting on it in several different ways. Painting on feathers is like a microcosm, and I can do it for so long, and then I start to feel like I'm kind of spiraling in, and I just have to open up and get a bigger kind of approach to work. So that's when I'll go and do the paint on cottons, do something that's much larger scale, much looser, just to break myself out of that kind of hypnotic microcosm state. And then when I painted something large for a while, I start feeling like it's getting too big, and I pull it back down into the smaller pieces. And it's not always feathers, sometimes it's on the leather. On the leather painting, there's not much preparation that has to be done. You just start painting, you do your drawing if you want, and then just start painting directly. With the cottons or the fabrics, the preparation is just in washing the materials and putting the shape on that you're going to paint, and that's the real simple. The most complicated is the feathers. And then once the feathers are painted, if I'm doing a big piece, very often it's like getting one of those puzzles that huge puzzles that has no picture, and all the pieces are tiny, and you don't know what it's supposed to look like when it's finished. I always feel like I have one of those unknown boxes with 1 million pieces in it, and I'm not sure what the picture's supposed to look like. So that's really a very complicated, kind of scary process, because I'm never sure it's going to look wonderful again. It has looked wonderful once, but I'm never sure if I'm going to blow it or not. You almost have to get in a state of, in a state of trust and not worrying about the picture. And the pictures on the feathers always kind of say where they want to be put. I mean, if you just don't worry about it and you stay real balanced, it kind of, again, makes its own painting. And I'm always totally surprised at what it looks like when it's through. I never know what it's going to look like. I don't plan for it to look a certain way. So that's very exciting. We still have that sense from the beginning of time, and we have all of that information. But in working in practical ways and driving cars, it somehow drops away. I think everyone reacts with their instincts at certain points in time because they don't have information. I work a little bit differently than most people, I'm told. I mean, it feels perfectly natural to me. I work on the floor, and it feels real comfortable. Ever since I was a kid, I've been a floor sitter. If you put me in a regular chair, I'll have my legs crossed and off the ground. It's a comfortable way for me to sit. And so in my studio, my work is done on the floor. All my paints are on the floor, and it sometimes looks like an incredible array of different things, but I like to have everything that I use within reach. And it might look disorganized to some, but I find when I clean up my studio space, I can't find anything when I get it organized. So it has a particular kind of order for me.
In her early days, Kaeleen painted on inexpensive muslin as an alternative to canvas. Although she still paints on fabric, leather has become a favorite material.
I think Bill Wiley, who's a painter, was working with chamois, and he thought that it would be a material that I would love. So he gave me one of his skins that he was working with, and I just loved working on it. And again, my materials, my paints weren't real fast on that kind of fabric. So I had to find a chemist to devise a leather paint for me that would hold so that it could be dry cleaned. I mean, I wanted it to be practical also. So they kind of had to invent this paint for me that I still use on the leather that's dry cleanable and washable and color fast and all that. So a friend of mine started me on that process too. One of the most interesting things about doing art, or whatever it is that we're doing, is the process. And when I do a piece, it's not figured out beforehand. I do it as it proceeds, and it's very often like I'm watching it do itself. And the place your mind gets in, and I guess the place your mind gets in is so fascinating. Sometimes I feel like I'm watching my own mind. And to me, the piece is never as exciting as the process. I mean, if people would know what it felt like to go through that state of mind, it's just absolutely fascinating. And I think, I can see a beautiful piece or a strong piece, but it's never the same as doing it. I mean, the doing it that's what I'm hooked on, is the process. Well, all of my pieces, if not wearable, at least suggest that they're wearable. I've done very few that you couldn't actually wear, but some of them would be highly impractical because of the feathers or because of the statement. It would be difficult to wear them unless you were doing a major ritual, or so they're meant for the wall. But they're always meant for the body, too. Also, when I'm doing clothing, when I paint, the pieces are flat, but I'm always thinking in terms of how they're going to turn, what they're going to look like from every angle. So you have to think, even though you're working flat, in a three-dimensional way. because they become sculpture when they're on the body. And for me, they need to stand on their own as a piece on a wall. I mean, if you want it to hang your whatever it is on the wall, it has to hold up that way. But it absolutely has to hold up as a performance. Essentially that's what's happening. It's a three-dimensional painting that becomes a performance. So often in clothing, the back is absolutely ignored, and so is the side. I mean, people think that you only have a front, and they don't pay attention to, all the dimensions. So that was another challenge initially, to take into consideration, how you move, how you sit, what angles are there, so that something is happening. There's a whole range of work that I do, from what you might call accessories or smaller pieces to larger pieces. Part of that is just because I like to work that way. I like the smaller pieces are sometimes a relief from the bigger pieces. Another is absolutely practical. More people are willing to invest, $300 in something than they are $3,000 or $6,000. So if in fact I need to make my living from this, I have to realize that, there have to be things that are affordable. So, and I like working in all those ways. I don't think that, you can have a little jewel of a thing or a big jewel of a thing. And, it still has the integrity there. So sometimes I'll do belts. I got into a whole fascination with gloves. I bought the glove blanks, a dozen of them, from this place back in New York, and started painting on the gloves. And then I started adding pieces onto the gloves, and I thought of them more as gauntlets than gloves. And once they got on the hands, they became like theater. The symbols on them were pretty strong.
Kaeleen wanted to expand the business aspect of her work. To be closer to the marketplace, she left her Santa Cruz studio to live in San Francisco. The change of location had some interesting effects on her work.
For the last 2 years I've been living in San Francisco. I felt it essential to get in an urban area in order to really get myself established in a business sense. I needed to bring in a certain amount of income, and it's very hard to do business on a mountaintop. But after about 1.5 years, I realized I wasn't doing the major kind of work that I'd done here, and that I needed that landscape for those images to start happening, for those major expansive pieces. I needed the expansive nature here. So it paid off for me to move up there financially, but when I got back here, I just kind of went, I'm back where I belong. I just think if you love something enough and you keep your integrity just really clean and don't compromise, and just stay with it, that something will come out of it. I mean, you don't have to pigeonhole yourself. Discovery is one of the most exciting parts of going through the process. I wouldn't encourage anyone to become an artist unless they're willing to struggle and work very hard. I wouldn't have it any other way, but it's not an easy road, but it's very exciting. And it's a lot of work. I mean, you're committed. It's 24 hours a day. If you're not doing it, you're thinking about it, or thinking about the next piece. And you work privately. It's lonely sometimes, But I think if you love something enough, it's just, I mean, why not? Just go for it.